Hi everyone, this video is going to be different than anything we've done on the channel before, but with USDGC just over a week away, I figured why not drop a USDGC predictions video. We will be there next week filming videos, both normal videos and shorts, hopefully posting stuff each day. So if you are interested in seeing that, you're not going to pay for coverage potentially, but you want to be able to watch some of the highlights, feel free to subscribe. We're hoping to be able to put out a lot of content next week while we're there. So yeah, if you're not going to pay to get past the paywall, consider us for at least highlights. We're not going to be filming full rounds or anything, but highlights we should have. So with that being said, this is my second time recording this video. The first time I went 24 minutes, so this time I've told myself do not go over 10. I do not want this to be a 24-minute video when I'm only talking about 10 players. So I will go ahead and get started and do my best to stay within that time slot. So in 10th place, so I'm going 6 through 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then ultimately the champion. So in 10th place, I have, where is he? Greg Barsby. So Greg, he's had a really good season. He's been in contention quite a bit. Good backhand, one of the best forehands in the world. Really hot putting. When it's on, and then also he can throw in unlike anyone I've ever seen. Like from 100 to 150, this guy somehow manages to make one or two around. It's just absurd, but it's such a weapon because he's getting strokes where no one else is getting strokes. And he's just willing to go for it. He has the right technique to not go long if he runs it from 100, and it is such a weapon for him. Not to mention 2018 world champion. He's shown up on big stages, and I expect this year Greg will do well at the USDGC and push into the top 10. So now in 9th, bit of a controversial pick. I didn't just want to put all of the top players at the top, so I'm going to put Eagle in 9th. Eagle, most talented player in the world. He's only been playing in majors this year, but did win the European Open, beating Macbeth in a very tight race. Eagle has what it takes, especially resting between these events, although you might lose some of that rhythm. He's also staying rested, so his power is going to be there. He's going to be composed. He hasn't been grinding like so many of the players on tour week after week after week. Or if he is, it's just field work. It's not all of the travel. So I think he'll be fresh. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins it, but I'm putting him in 9th because I want to change it up a little bit. So I have Eagle in my prediction, overly specific prediction. Slow start. First, maybe second round are slow. Battles back third and fourth, and gets into the top 10. So now moving to 8th, we have Drew Gibson. Drew had a great start to the season winning in Las Vegas. He's kind of slowed down since then, but this is a course that requires accurate distance, and Drew's as good as anyone in the world at accurate distance. And when his putting's on, like we saw last year at the Pro Tour Championship, he can compete with anyone. So with him having been having slower performances as of late, I'm kind of betting on a bounce back here that Drew's going to play well because I know he has what it takes to dominate this course. So now moving to 7, I was going to have Corey Ellis, but I don't see his picture here, so I'm going to sub him in for Chris Clemens. Although if Corey Ellis ends up finishing top 10, I will take credit for that because Corey Ellis would be here for obvious reasons with the way he's played this season. But I will sub in Chris Clemens. Chris, I feel very confident with this pick as well. He's got it all. He's got a really good forehand, one of the best in the sport. But then his backhand's gotten a lot better. His putting's gotten a lot better. And it just seems like his overall, mental game has allowed him to elevate himself this year. Like he's been coming in the top 10 a lot more than we've seen in the past. He just seems to have kind of taken that next step, and so I'm expecting that he will be in the top 10 this year at USDGC. And now rounding out our bottom 5 of the top 10 is our runner-up from last year, Kyle Klein. Compared to last year, Kyle's had relatively slow season. He hasn't been in contention much, doesn't have any wins. But after last year, losing in a playoff to Macbeth, not that that's anything to hang your head about, but I expect that he will bounce back, and this will be the best performance of his season. So now moving to 5th, I'm going to go with Aaron Gossage, so our runner-up at this year's Worlds. Aaron has everything that it takes. He has some of the best power in the world. I mean, forehand, backhand, combined distance, he might be number 1 or only bested by Anthony Barella and Eagle McMahon. I mean, the guy absolutely bombs it, even with a smaller frame compared to those two. And when his putting's on, which that was the biggest issue, like in the last round at Worlds, was his putting was struggling a little bit, like from edge of circle or just inside the circle. If that's on, Aaron has all of the tools, and he generally shows up in these big tournaments. So I'm going to put Aaron in 5th. And I'm doing all right on time. It's going to be close. So now moving to 4th, someone who's not a stranger to finishing high up in these big events, and that is Calvin Heinberg. Calvin, one of the best backhands in the world, an underrated forehand. People think of him as backhand dominant, but he actually has a really good forehand that he's developed, and when his putting is on, he can shoot some of the hottest scores in disc golf. And not to mention, he's been very close at this event. Outside of some unfortunate rollaways in that rainy USDGC final day where he lost to Chris Dickerson, he would have already been a USDGC champion. So I'm sure he wants to get back there and once again compete to finally win his first major, which he's very deserving of. So Calvin, yeah, I will be shocked if he's not in the top 5 going into that final day. He will be in contention this year. Now moving to our top 3. So in 3rd place, somebody who's playing better than anyone in the world right now, and that is, where is he located? How am I missing him? There he is. Simon Lizotte. So Simon, coming off of the win at Maple Hill, that was his 4th win of the season. I mean, this is far and away the best season of his career, and he really is playing better than anyone right now. His backhand, one of the best in the world, as we know, so versatile. But his forehand's really underrated. Kind of like Calvin, he doesn't go to it much because he can do so much with his backhand. But when Simon forehands, he doesn't have a ton of body movement with his forehand, but he gets so much snap. I mean, he can throw a forehand far, he can throw it accurately, and his putting is so good. So now that it seems like he's kind of solved the mental aspect of the game, which seemed to have maybe been one of his issues in the past. Obviously, he'd go for Simon lines. We all know all of that. Take risks that he didn't need to make or didn't need to take. It seems like now he's kind of learned from that, become a more mature player, and we're seeing it this year. He's won 4 events. So now to number 2, and Simon, he might be the betting favorite right now to win this thing if it's not Macbeth. So now number 2 is Chris Dickerson. Chris won this event before, as I mentioned, beating Calvin in the rain. Chris won the first major of this year as well. So he's already won a major this season, and he's someone that generally shows up in these big tournaments. He's got all of the tools, but he's also just very composed, as we all know. A lot like Calvin, very composed, doesn't seem to let the nerves get to him. And that's a recipe to succeed and to finish well at these events, because so many of the other players that haven't been here, haven't won one, generally the nerves will get to them, especially on this course. There's so much OB, there's hole 17, there's a lot of pressure, and Dickerson, more so than almost anyone, doesn't let it get to him. So Chris, I'm going to have as runner-up for this year. And then number 1 should be no surprise, but people are probably wondering because you have Ricky and Paul still left on the list. But I'm going to go with Paul Macbeth to win it once again, back-to-back. So Paul, I'm about to hit the 10-minute mark, but here we are. So Paul, what can you say? He's probably the favorite to win this. He's always showing up in these big events every time. Like last year, he loses in the most devastating fashion possible at Worlds. He then comes back and wins the USDGC in a playoff. And then this year, doesn't win Masters or the first major of the season. He then loses to Eagle McMahon at European Open. Had Eagle not been there, Paul would have won that tournament by like 10 strokes. So he has two kind of tough defeats and then goes to Worlds, wins it. So I think as if he needs, anyone else to hype him up, I think Paul's going to win it this year. He's kind of firing on all cylinders, and he just always has that extra gear that he can seem to get into in these big events that other players just can't. You see others come and go, and Paul's just there every single major. He is always there competing. So I'm sure he's going to want to defend his title and win yet another USDGC. And I'll add to that the whole thing with Ricky trying to discredit Worlds after having not won it. I think that probably rubbed Paul the wrong way. Not that he'd admit it, but Paul wins Worlds, his 6th, while Ricky has 2. And then shortly after, Ricky, I think in the next tournaments, pre-tournament press conference, says something along the lines of Worlds should be decided by the whole season's performance, not just one event. And it just seemed like a bad time to bring that up after your biggest rival just won his 6th. It just seemed a little, I don't want to call Ricky a sore loser, but that's the way it came off to me and probably a lot of people. It's like you bring this up now as if you would have made this statement if you just won your 3rd. Now's when you decide to bring up, Worlds shouldn't be decided by a single event, even though Ricky still has 2-time world champion listed on most of his disc releases. It seemed a little disingenuous. And then on top of that, Ricky then at Maple Hill when he won Disc Golf Pro Tour points champion, he gets the big trophy. Definitely a nicer trophy than Paul got at Worlds. But he then proceeds to say or imply that this is the biggest trophy or win of his entire career. And it just seems like he's going a little too far to try to discount what Paul has done at Worlds because Ricky managed to win the points championship, which barely, by I think a 1-putt margin did Ricky win the points championship, and then he's talking like that's the biggest win of his career. So, yeah, that kind of got on my nerves. I like Ricky, but do I expect Ricky to start putting 1x Disc Golf Pro Tour points champion on his disc instead of 2-time world champion? No. But do I think he was upset that Paul now has 3 times as many Worlds and 3 more? Well, Ricky's never won USDGC, so 3 more USDGC titles. I'm sure it gets on Ricky's nerves. And Ricky continues to say he's the best player in the world. So there's definitely some controversy between the two, even though they're friends. I think what's been going on is probably going to be added motivation for Paul. He'd never admit it. A lot of people would never admit it, like Paul doesn't care one way or the other, that sort of thing. But I'm sure that it's bothered him a little bit, and you could even see it when when Paul got the 2nd place trophy and didn't even want to speak about it. He's not someone that likes to be bested, so I think he's going to show up and maybe win this thing by a significant margin. So thank you all for watching. That is my top 10. So Greg Barsby, Eagle McMahon, Drew Gibson, Chris Clemens / Corey Ellis, Kyle Klein, Aaron Gossage, Calvin Heinberg, Simon Lizotte, Chris Dickerson, and Paul Macbeth to win back-to-back USDGC championships. Once again, we will be making content next week, so if you're interested, please subscribe. We'll have a lot of highlights and clips from the tournament, and I guess we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe if you would be interested. Thanks, everyone.